It was an early morning at Sweet Apple Acres. Applejack was up early in the morning to take care of her chores with her brother Big Macintosh, while Apple Bloom were at school and Granny Smith was sleeping still a bit later to that morning. After they had been taking care of the chores, Macintosh asked Applejack if it was possible for her to go into town to get some ingredients for that evening's dinner. Applejack said that she could, since she didn't have any other plans and since also she had finished all her morning chores, so she decided to go into town. When she arrived in town, she went straight to the market. She looked around the different stands to find the right ingredients that she was needed, since Macintosh had given her a list of certain ingredients. After she had found them, but as she was about to walk back home, she ran into actually some of her friends, Fluttershy and Rarity. Turns out Rarity was up early that morning also, since she was going to work on some new designs for an upcoming fashion show in Canterlot. And Fluttershy, who had offered her help to be a model for her, so they used small talk for a little bit as before Applejack had to go back to home. When she arrived, she put all the things in the kitchen and she told Macintosh that she found the ingredients that was on the list and he said thanks. Then she asked him if there was something else he needed help with, but he shook his head and said no. So since Applejack didn't have any other plans to do, so she decided why not just walk around among the apple trees just to relax. Rest of that after that early noon, Applejack was just felt a bit restless. So she decided to go into town again to see what her other friends are up to. Since she knew that Rarity and Fluttershy will be busy at Rarity's boutique, it would make sense so that she would be able to disturb them at least. So she went over to Sugarcoat Corner to buy some cupcakes from Pinkie Pie. When Pinkie saw her, "Hey AJ, hey Pinkie Pie, do you need help with something?" asked Pinkie. Um, yeah, I'm actually looking forward to buy some cupcakes. Do you have any to recommend? Pinkie was actually smiling and said that they actually had just made some fresh cherry cupcakes. And it was actually one of Pinkie's favorites, she said. So Applejack decided why not to try it. So she ordered at least one package, or at least a box, with at least a dozen of cupcakes. After she paid for it, they small talked for a little bit before that Applejack decided to leave. But she didn't know exactly where to go then, since she knew that Rarity and Fluttershy were busy. And she probably remembers that Rainbow Dash is not in town for a couple of days since she was at the Wonderbolt Academy. So she decided why not go to see Twilight if she is up to something. So she went to the castle and Spike opened the door and he was actually surprised to see her at that early noon. But he let her in. Twilight wasn't really doing any much busy things actually. She was just sitting in the library reading some Daring Do for herself. She was quite so surprised to see Applejack. But she was always happy to see some of her friends. So she actually gave Applejack some tea and they start having the cupcakes together. They just small talk about some random stuff and like that. While talking, Applejack asked Twilight how it is going between her and Flash Sentry so far. Flash and Twilight have been dating for at least about 2 years. And Twilight said it was actually going well, and she asked the same thing as for Applejack. Since Applejack and Caramel has been dating for about almost 6 months at this point, Applejack was really excited and happy to have found her might be the right soulmate for her. She explained to Twilight that she and Caramel are planning to go out on a date that in a few days to celebrate their 6 months anniversary. Twilight was actually happy since ever since she had moved to Ponyville and when she became the next princess, she has never seen Applejack been dating any pony. And even when she had asked some of the other friends, they all confirmed that ever since they had known Applejack, she had never been interested in dating. Even though that rarely it's multiple times they're trying to convince Applejack to try to go out. But having to work at the family farm and raising her own younger sister along with her brother and grandmother, it is so very much difficult to do so. Now, also that she is a teacher at the School of Friendship, it makes it a bit harder for her. But she managed to find some time for at least some time for dating when Caramel asked her out on a date almost 6 months ago. She was just happy though. Even at first, she didn't expect this was gonna be last this long. She said she was expecting maybe it was gonna only last for a couple of months or maybe as max of 2 months. But she was just happy. After all, Caramel has always been very polite, very gentle, cold, and very kind. And Twilight was just happy to hear that. She said, "You know, Applejack, I'm just happy that you actually found some pony that makes you feel happy. Considering that as long as I have known you, you have always been busy, with farm work and now school as a teacher. But having it enough found enough time for dating, I'm actually proud of you. You actually grown uncomfortable to be around other ponies that's been dating." And Applejack said that, "Yeah, I agree that, Sugar Cube, but even though you probably are the same thing. Well, being a Celestia student and studying a lot, and now we've been a princess and have my own duties, and now as a head mayor after school of friendship and a teacher. Yeah, it's a lot to handle. But me and Flash, we managed to let this work though. Despite not being able to see each other so often as we wanted to, but it works. And that was something that we are happy about." "I can see that why," Twilight said Applejack with a big smile. The rest of the afternoon, or the early noon, Applejack and Twilight actually had a good time. They were just enjoying their time together before Applejack had to go back home. A couple of days later, Applejack was waiting at the farm for Caramel to show up for the date. But unfortunately, it seems that he didn't show up at the time they were supposed to meet. But he did show up maybe it's just about 5 to 10 minutes later that a supposed time. But it was nothing else she didn't bother about. But when he did show up, she was excited to see him. But as she was about to give him a hug and a kiss, he stopped her. She asked if something was wrong. He saw that he looked a little bit sad and explained it to Applejack that he had just been offered a position of a new job in Baltimore. And Applejack speaks. She had big eyes and was like, "But that's great, isn't it?" "Yeah, but I had to live in Baltimore if I had to take the offer, and I already had to accept the offer, so I had to move." "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow." Tomorrow? We can try to go to work at this a long distance. I mean, it is worth a try at least." Applejack was a little bit sad to hear that, but he was still the same proud to hear that Caramel had found an opportunity. He was actually working as carpenter, and having been offered a position in Baltimore was a big deal for him. So they make sure to try to this long distance as possible. But after a couple of weeks of being this long distance, they only send letters back and forward, and they promise to see each other as soon as possible. But after after just barely just 1 month after that Caramel had moved. He sent her a letter back to Applejack to explain that he didn't see that his long distance relationship wasn't working, and that maybe it was time for them to find someone else to be with. And he was sorry, but he wishes her best luck and best wishes. Applejack felt devastated. She didn't mention this to her family for first, but after she was sad for most of the rest of that day, even when she took care of her chores, Apple Bloom did notice something was wrong. But when she asked, Applejack didn't say much at all. It's just, yeah, tired, work. But after that same evening, by accident, Big Macintosh found the letter in a trash. Since he was going to take out the trash, but by an accident, he knocked it over and found the letter. It was then Applejack actually finally revealed to her family what was wrong. Granny Smith told Applejack that she was sorry to hear, but she said there's always other ponies out there to find. Maybe it wasn't meant that her and Caramel to be as a long-term relationship, but they tried at least to make it work, and that's something that Applejack was agreed on. And when the rest of her friends found out, they were also very devastated, especially Rarity, who had often said that she could see that Caramel and Applejack and Mary started a family together, but hearing those words hit Applejack even more. And after that, just she didn't show up at the school of friendship or back in town at all for almost a week. She decided to stay at the farm to take care of her things there. But just something that was unlike a character, said Twilight to her friends. But at least they tried to feed her at any time. But one day, when Granny Smith had actually received an invitation to see an old friend who lived in Trottingham. And since this was during summer break, and Apple Bloom also wanted to see another relative who lived in Trottingham. So Granny Smith actually allowed her and Apple Bloom go to Trottingham for about 2 weeks. During that time, Big Macintosh and Applejack would still remain at the farm to take care of it. But just only a couple of days after that Granny Smith and Apple Bloom had left, both Macintosh and Applejack started to notice there were just too much work for them to handle just by themselves. Applejack said, Big Macintosh, is probably because we should considering to hire some pony to help here. I mean, this is a lot of work for even you and me. And that Big Macintosh said, yep, too much. So Applejack agreed and would begin to Macintosh. So she wrote in an ad and instead of put it up on a board in town, hoping that some pony would consider it to work at the farm for an experience and maybe as for an exercise. At first, there was no word of any help. That was only like 2 days after she put it up the ad when this stallion walked into the farm and asked if this was Sweet Apple Acres. Applejack said yes. This is Sweet Apple Acres, and I'm Applejack, and this is my big brother, Big Macintosh. And your name is? And he said his name was Buck Evergreen. Buck Evergreen wasn't a local, but he said that he was actually visiting an old friend who lives in Ponyville. But he was originally from Philadelphia, but he was only staying in town for about 3 weeks. And he noticed that the ad of that the ponies at the Sweet Apple Acres was looking for help. And according to his old friend, this family actually are one of the biggest in the town that provides with apples and all kinds of things. And he wanted to learn about some farming and even do some exercise to get in shape. So Applejack and Macintosh did show them around, showed Buck around at the farm, showed him what chores to do and also gave him a list. He started working there the same afternoon, and was told that he will be there every single day around 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning, depending on when they're supposed to be there. And he promised to be there. But the very next day, he didn't show up until like almost 10 minutes after 8 in the morning. But he said that one of the reasons was that he woke up a little bit later than usual and had to be rushing to breakfast. Applejack and Big Macintosh wasn't mad. They understood his reason. So, so the next couple of weeks, back Buck Evergreen actually was a hard worker, and even when Applejack and Big Macintosh said that he was a really hard worker and very hard worker and very polite and very kind, anything. But after 2 weeks, Granny Smith and Apple Bloom came back home, and they were surprised to see another pony at the farm. When they saw him alone, they asked him who is he and what he was doing at the farm. But then when he explained that he was temporarily hired to help around the farm, since it was only Big Macintosh and Applejack. So they asked, where are they? Macintosh was among the apple trees to find some more apples, and Applejack, she was in the barn. She overheard the conversation, and she did confirm. He was only staying there for about in town for 3 weeks, and he wanted to have some experience, and she explained that without his help, there probably would have been a lot of setbacks in the farming. And after the third week of his stay, he was very sad that he had to go back home to Philadelphia. But he thanked Macintosh and the rest of the family for his time there to help. So before the last day, Applejack and Macintosh and the rest of the family actually did throw a small party to celebrate his as a thanks for his help. He very much appreciated it. He told them that this is a great experience and great opportunity to learn more about apple farming. He had actually was considering to start a small farm back home. But on the day before, but the day was he was leaving, he actually went back to Sweet Apple Acres and said he wanted to say the last goodbye to his new friends. And for some reason, during those 2 weeks that he has been working at the farm, he actually had got to know more about Applejack. And he had actually felt a bit attracted towards her. But he never explained that or told that her at all. Because he didn't just want to be any approaching her like to be as giving her false hope or anything. But she liked him. But ever since he left, they actually remained in contact by letters. Surprising enough, when just one day Applejack received a letter from Buck Evergreen. She didn't even expect it. They didn't even make any plans of remain in touch, but it did. And she was actually very happy to see that he was doing well back in Philadelphia, and things actually seems going really well between them. After all, they only been talking for a couple of weeks at a time after he left. But he made a promise that he would be back in town around the time around fall to help them around more to do this apple cider season. And she and her family would appreciate more extra help, just in case it would happen. Even during the time when Applejack actually spent time with Buck Evergreen when he was helping at the farm, she actually started feeling some sort of attraction towards him. Even she didn't know it at first, but it would only take her time, sometimes after he had returned back home to Philadelphia. But one day, when she was doing some farm chores, she heard a voice behind her, and when she turned around, she saw Buck Evergreen. Buck, what are you doing here? Um, I'm here for a visit. Do you see a friend? Actually, no. I'm here to see you. Me? She said, a big question mark. Yeah. Um, can we talk? Yeah. Can you give me a minute? I have to be taking of this first. Yeah, sure. So, as he was waiting outside, he was a bit nervous. But when she came up out of her barn, she walked up to him and he said that the reason why he came back to Ponyville is particular, especially to this farm, he wanted to tell her that he wanted to tell her directly, not only by letters. It's not the same thing, he said. She was curious what it could actually be about. But then he said that during the time when they were get to know each other when he was working at the farm, he had actually fallen in love with her. And he understands that she doesn't have the same feelings for him, but just he would rather to tell that himself directly, not over by letters. Because if she had even responded back to his letter, he would have taken it as a sign that she didn't want to talk to him ever again, or she's been felt somehow insulted or something. But Applejack then said, "You know, I would have been like that. I mean, sure, I may have been surprised about it, but honestly, Sugar Cube, I really appreciate your honesty. After all, I'm known as the element of honesty myself." That he knew. But then she said that she actually were in love with him as well. And before he could say anything, she grabbed his napkin around his neck and pulled him closer to herself and gave him a kiss. Something that he didn't even expect of all. He really was expecting maybe something else, but after she had kissed him, he smiled at her and said, "Wow, that was unexpected and I say a bit fierily." That's the feeling of like that. She smiled and laughed a bit, said, "Yeah, I didn't expect you to react that way." But then he kissed her back and said, "You know what? How about we go out this evening? My treat." Applejack smiled and said, "Sure. Where you want to go?" Then he said that this restaurant in town which has a good food, and she knew exactly which one he meant. She nodded and said that he will be at the farm around 5 p.m. to pick her up. She nodded and he went away. She told the rest of the family that he was back. They were surprised, but when she explained the reason also why, they were really stunned. But especially Apple. She was like jumping up and down, very much of joy that said, "Oh, my sister found her love! She's happy!" And Applejack wasn't really much trying to hide it. She was blushing and smiling. She was so red in her face. And even Granny Smith said, "You know, I'm really happy that you perhaps found somebody. You are really lucky." Granny Smith was right though, because ever since this second meeting with him, after a while, she was actually really happy. Because this feelings towards him had only got stronger ever since the kiss. Ever since he kissed her back, it was like a sign that maybe this could be the one that she has been waiting for. The rest of the day, she was waiting excitedly on her first date with Buck Evergreen. Around 5 p.m., he did show up, and he was very polite. They went to a small restaurant in town and just having a great time. They enjoyed the food and they had a lot of talks about. She wanted to know more about his life back in Philadelphia, how it's like, what he's been doing ever since he came, since being left. He said that he is actually working as a librarian, well, as a volunteer job, but he also working as a carpenter. That surprised him even more. because Applejack explained to Buck Evergreen that her last boyfriend was also a carpenter, and he was offered a position in Baltimore and he moved. He was a little bit surprised of that, but then she asked if he had been ever offered a position of some other place. He said that he had, at least a few times, at least about 2 times before, in 2 different towns, one in Manhattan and one in Trollhättan. But he declined both offers. She wanted to know why. He said even though they were a good offer, good and raised in payment, and could have even moved his to promote him maybe older one day, but he didn't want to do that. He was actually happy to that state. He preferred staying in Philadelphia because it was actually his home. But he said if he had found in love with somebody who lived somewhere else, and if they would have to move live in the same town or village, he would have considered that though. But they didn't talk more much about it. They preferred to just enjoy the date, and even afterwards, they walked around the town to watch the stars and just having a great time. And they even then went back to the farm where he gave her a goodnight kiss and said goodbye, and that he said that he was staying at a hotel in town for a couple of days for about a week. So they had a lot of time to spend up to. Even though this only about a week, but it felt like an eternity for them. Even though they tried to spend it in as much time they wanted to, but if they could. But despite that, Applejack had her work at the farm and as a teacher. But she always tried her best to climb to put some time to be with Buck Evergreen. But unfortunately, even after a week, he had to go back home. So he did. But she promised us that she would try to get time enough to see him this time. He smiled and said, I'm looking forward to it. And unfortunately, that didn't happen as soon as they wanted to. Time, sometimes things came between, but they both agreed on it. After about maybe as 3 months, both actually announced they were now in an official relationship. His family and her family and their both friends was just excited. Because even though that Buck Evergreen's family has never seen her, but one day she wrote to him that she is actually coming over to Philadelphia to meet him and hopefully to see his family. When she did, his family was very much happy because they knew exactly who she were after that he had been telling them about her. She was just happy to be able to see her possible future parents-in-law. But some things always came between. Because during her time in Philadelphia, while they were out for a small restaurant during an early noon for lunch, a mayor walked up to Buck Evergreen and turns out supposed to be his ex-girlfriend. She wasn't well much happy at first that he had moved on from her, because they were together for nearly 2 years. But the reason why they were not together anymore is because he found out she had been cheating on him for almost 3 months with another mare, another stallion that he knew. And when she found out he had been dating another mare, she wasn't happy because in her mind they were still a couple, even though he called their relationship off. But she didn't accept it. And she said, "Who is this mare? Are you cheating on me, Buck Evergreen?" But he said calmly, "You and I are not together anymore. We haven't been there for months. This is Applejack, my new girlfriend, and I love her. The reason why I broke up with you because you cheated on me. And Applejack's just trying to explain that maybe it was best for her just to go. Because she didn't want to have any trouble, and she's like snapped and said, "Am I talking to you?" "No. So don't talk to me unless I want to talk to you." Then she went back to Buck Evergreen. But he then said, "Listen, why didn't you just go back to the stallion that you were dating? Some quote unquote dating, when you were dating me." But that was actually something that she did. Turns out, ever since Buck left her, she went to the stallion that she was cheating on him to be with. But he left her for some time after that because he didn't like her the same way anymore. But Buck said, "Listen, I know that this may be hurt for you, but how about this? I have a friend who is actually looking for a girlfriend. And if you want, I can set a time for you to meet." At first she was angry, but she listened, fully, and he said who it was, and her eyes got a bit big, and she realized who he was talking about. There was a close friend to both of them. But she luckily agreed to do so. So she decided to go to meet this stallion. And that was the last thing he heard from her, since turns out she was actually looking for this stallion to be with. It turns out they were the right couple, that he was the right stallion that she waited for. But Applejack was just happy that this meeting with Buck's ex-girlfriend it didn't escalate too far. But she was just happy. And even her time in Philadelphia was short. But she just had a good time. She loved to spend enough time with Buck Evergreen in Philadelphia. But then when the winter arrived, Applejack actually invited Buck Evergreen to celebrate Hearthstone Eve with her family, and accepted it. He actually gave her some candy that was homemade for as a gift, and she liked it. She actually gave him a scarf, which he really much appreciated. But it was something else that he had planned for her. During the time when they were just sitting by next to the open fire, something did happen. He actually proposed to Applejack, and she was not expecting that. But she was happy. She said yes immediately. Her family, let's say they were stunned, but they were just happy about themselves. They decided to have a small close wedding by the next spring. And when that happened, in the springtime, Rarity was just happy to be able to make the dress for Applejack. And she was just very much happy about this. Applejack actually had chosen Fluttershy to be her bridesmaid, and Buck Evergreen, he had asked being Macintosh to be his best man, which he said yes. After the wedding, they actually had a small party, which everyone was just having a good time. But then, when they were supposed to go on their honeymoon, Twilight has a big surprise for them. She had arranged so they can go to 2 weeks to a tropical island, and they very much appreciate this gift. They were on this island for about 2 weeks, had a great time, doing some sightseeing, a lot of swimming in the ocean, just having an amazing time. And just barely 3 years after that they had been married. Buck Evergreen actually at the time had actually moved to Ponyville, opened his own carpenter shop, and it was a good success too. And then, just like I said, 3 years after that, they had a big announcement. The big announcement were that they were expecting a fall over the next couple of months. And they had a daughter. And 3 years later for that, they had a son. They were just happy to have a family of their own. Even Big Buck Evergreen couldn't have been happier to have found his true love. And even Applejack. After her breakup with Caramel, she didn't expect to be able to find her true love with its own pronouns like Buck Evergreen. But she was just happy because he treated her with such kindness, respect, and always cheered her up if she was having a bad day. And this is how Buck Evergreen and Applejack found true love, got a family together. The end.